As other members on this side of the House have said, we are absolutely opposed to Clause 6, and I would like to start with covering the changes to Section 229A, where membership of student associations is voluntary. Mr Chair, this is an unnecessary piece of legislation. There is no problem that it is trying to fix. It is not in the interests of the majority of students. Ordinary students who are just trying to get through their qualifications, who are just trying to live from one week to the next, they are not interested in this piece of legislation. They didn't call for it. And in fact, this change, especially the 229A, this is going to drive up their costs. Their student costs, their tertiary costs are going to get driven up by this, so their cost of living is going to go up even further than it already is, and all for what? All for what? To satisfy the whim of a small number of ACT on-campus members. That is it. This was not called for by thousands of students. This isn't a response to many students across the country coming forward and asking for this change. This is a response to a tiny few number of students who are aligned to the ACT Party, who for some reason want to put ideology over common sense. That's all this is about. So 229A says no student or prospective student at an institution is required to be a member of a students' association. There is a very simple solution to this problem that in fact the Select Committee seemed to be looking at until the very persuasive Mrs Roy returned to the Select Committee. That would be simply to give students clearer options for opting out of a student association. That would solve the problem. If that really is the problem, that would solve it. But I think we really do see what this bill is all about when we look at the changes to Clause 6 that were made by the Select Committee. And I'm particularly interested in 229B, which refers to undue influence, because I think the changes made by the Select Committee are actually very good. They're appropriate because they balance the issue of undue influence to both parties, or to the multiple parties that might be involved in influencing someone to become or not become a member of a student association. Because the original wording was all about how student associations, those nasty, evil, horrible student associations, weren't allowed to exert undue influence on any student. And that's what this is all about. This comes from an ideological position that student associations are bad, that they are a bad thing, and that they exert pressure on students to become members, and that Parliament should be doing something to undermine those student associations and get rid of them. The change made by the Select Committee, I think, is an appropriate one, and it actually balances things out. So the new wording says that a prospective student with cannot have influence exerted on them to become a member, but nor can they have undue influence exerted on them to not become a member or to leave a student association. I think that appropriately reflects the fact that there are a range of opinions out there, and there may indeed be students or institutions as well. And I think that's an important change. There's an important amendment in Grant Robertson's supplementary order paper to include institutions in this clause, because institutions may also be guilty of exerting undue influence, either to get students into student associations or to keep them out, depending on what that institution's philosophy is towards the student association. I can absolutely understand why a tertiary institute may actually want to influence students to join the student association. It gives the institutions a point of contact with which to relate with students. It is much easier for the institutions if they have a strong student association, not only to provide the many services that student associations do provide, that the institutes themselves have acknowledged they would have to pick up. They would have to pick up those services if the student association is weakened. So that is one reason why a tertiary institute may want to influence students to join the student association. But I think it's absolutely appropriate that the institutions, that amendment should be included to ensure that institutions institutions can neither influence a student into a student association or out of a student association, or to encourage them not to join. But I do appreciate the fact that the Select Committee has looked at the ridiculous original... Mr Chair?
I call Claire Curran.